Okay. So hello again. If you could briefly say your name, where you are now, your age maybe.
Yeah, so my name is Vikram, Vikram Kolmannskog. So that's an Indian name and a Norwegian name. So
Ah,
I'm dual heritage, Indian origin mother and Norwegian father. And I'm based in Oslo, Norway, where I live together with my partner.
mhm, mhm.
And age as well, yes. I turned 40 September last year.
Ah, okay. Oh, so we are the same age.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, by the way, was it meaningful? I mean, this birthday, 40 birthday for you?
um, it was a very nice event actually. My partner had arranged, like, it wasn't a complete surprise for me, but he'd kind of arranged the whole like birthday celebration, and it was during this kind of gap in the pandemic, or at least in Norway, where it was during the kind of late summer, so it was okay to meet a little bit again, and it was outside on a roof terrace, so he'd kind of invited lots of my friends and colleagues, and it was really really beautiful with like different friends of mine who are creative, who did like all sorts of kind of poetic performances, and one person guided us all in a sort of a meditation, and it was really really nice. It felt
Oh,
like kind of a celebration that was like honoring some of the things that are important to me, so
huh?
it was nice to be. And the other thing actually, Camilla, when you ask about it, is that quite often when I was younger, if there was a large crowd of people and it was my party, then I was always a little bit stressed.
Mm,
I was always a little bit like, or like running from one person to the other, and I wasn't really enjoying it.
mm,
But this time, I really enjoyed the party. And, it was probably partly because Daniel, my partner, was the one who kind of formally was hosting or organizing. But
mhm.
still, I was the center point, but I was relaxed. And I
Cool.
was a bit like, I don't know, maybe it's growing older and more mature. I felt more like, I'll talk to the people I talk to. I'll just walk around. I'll enjoy myself. Like I decided I'm going to enjoy myself, and I hope everybody else just enjoys themselves. It was
Yeah,
nice. I
yeah,
let some kind of thing go.
I can understand the difference very well.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure, sure, yeah.
yeah,
Uh, and yeah, my birthday took place. I mean, I was born in July, so again, like in your case, it was outdoor, and
yeah,
it was this, as you put it, break in the pandemic.
yeah.
Yeah, so I could also enjoy it more, in fact,
Mm,
and squeezed somewhere here at home and zooming maybe.
mm,
Yeah, so I am interested in your origins also, because you mentioned, now that you mentioned that. Uh, can you say more about it?
yeah.
Hmm.
So my mother is born in Kenya.
Hmm.
So there's quite a large Indian diaspora, or there used to be a very large Indian diaspora in East Africa,
Hmm.
and now it's somewhat smaller. But it's part of this whole sort of what happened with the British Empire. People were moving around within the empire, and then when the empire collapsed, a lot of people felt, like my mother's family. It's a funny thing because of course they were for decolonialization. They fought very much for that, but still, I think the sense of home is kind of is very different. It's not like my mother. She doesn't feel that she doesn't feel that she belongs to Kenya. She feels like Kenya doesn't really accept her, and India doesn't really accept her. So she has this very sort of nomadic and
Mm.
kind of exile sense of self. I think where she's never she now she's living in Spain. She doesn't stop kind of moving.
Wow.
There's this rootlessness, I think, to her, but then also this idea that like the whole world is our family, or the whole world is our home. She kind of is very cosmopolitan like that as well.
Mhm.
And then there's I remember when I was young, like whenever we visit like my mother's family, and like all the aunts and uncles come together, they would sit up late at night and talk, like share stories about childhood in Kenya, and then different like legends of the ancestors in India. And I think this kind of storytelling becomes a sort of home then, more than an actual like physical place.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of the origin. Like, so my mother actually, she came to Norway to just, she was adventurous. She wanted to travel like after she finished her studies, and I think she found Norway a bit exotic.
Mhm.
And then she met my dad here, and she stayed for a very long time. So my
Mhm.
dad is Norwegian,
Mhm.
and it's kind of funny because they met at the hospital, which is very close to where I live now.
Oh.
They both and then the first year of my life, we lived as a family on the same street where I live now in Oslo. And my mother used to take me like for walks in this graveyard. That's like my favorite place in Oslo, and I go there. I was just there now before our conversation. So it's kind of interesting how like I think of myself in one way as a very cosmopolitan person, and I certainly did earlier in life, but now more and more I also have this sense of like a very local, space that I'm like cultivating some love
Mhm.
to this place, like these old trees in the graveyard. And
Mhm.
also the sense that like the idea that, oh, my mother took me for walks here since I was newborn. She would come here like with me, and these like, and also that it's a graveyard, it's like I feel this time and space is interesting.
Mhm.
So I feel really, really at home in this particular area of Oslo, I think.
Wow.
But for a long time of my life, I've kind of struggled with this identity because I wasn't, you know, um, immediately accepted as a Norwegian. I was always asked, "Where are you from?"
Uh-huh.
Um, and the same in India. I'm never like just immediately accepted as an Indian. So it becomes this kind of, different identity, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, because the question we usually ask our guests is about them, how they would characterize themselves as human beings,
mm,
and I guess you partly started to explore that
mm,
when I asked you about your parents. And could you say more what kind of person you are, what your values are, what your passions
mm,
are?
mm. Yes, I think, well, first of all, Camilla, I want to thank you because I think it's so good to give space and time to explore something like this,
Mm,
more than just which says maybe about what I do value, because it's more than just like the rushing onwards, producing something, performing, and doing things that are maybe somewhat externally driven or, defined by something else. So
mm,
I'd say that I do have this, I grew up dual heritage and ethnic minority in Norway, which is a very, very white dominated society. And and also I'm queer. So that also gave me a sort of an outsider,
mhm,
position in a sense. I didn't fit easily into the mainstream and into the norms, which I think gave me, particular kind of suffering and struggle. But eventually, as I was able to address that, I think it's also become, part of the gold that I have, like that I've been through some of that, and that I know something about looking at something with a certain maybe distance, or
mhm,
looking from several angles, maybe, or not just being in what's taken for granted.
mhm,
Um, So I've had that since I was quite young, and I think it's also motivated me somewhat in being very compassionate and having a strong sense of social justice in the world. That I do very easily empathize with various groups that are suffering and experiencing, different forms of oppression, and these things really, I'm very passionate about that, about reducing or addressing oppression and suffering. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, and just this curiosity about you know, exploring the human mind and exploring the human condition. That's also been with me since I was very, very young. I had a very, I was very spiritually curious. So, like, I didn't have a very religious upbringing. My dad is personally Christian, but he never sort of, he didn't like force anything on us, and we didn't pray much or anything. And my mother isn't very religious at all, I think. So it was more of when I sort of visited my mother's family, one of my aunts and my grandmother, I would sit with her and like meditate and ask her questions, and I was very, very curious about the human condition and what we are and what we long for, and
Mhm.
yeah. So I think that's still a very strong part of me, this sort of curiosity and compassion, and maybe what you kind of started out with as well, triggering a bit in me, the sense of like just exhaling and slow down and okay, um, noticing what's important and giving space to what's important. I really long for that.
I can see it, and I appreciate that too, actually. I'm aware this is like end of the week, Friday. I've been
Mm,
running.
mm,
I am planning to run over the weekend as well.
yeah.
And yeah, and now I'm really like slowing down with you,
Mm,
listening, and really seeing how much present you can be.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel very present with you now. I can feel like my legs and my feet, and yeah, I feel kind of soft, and it's good. And it reminds me of there's a Zen master who I really, really like, and I also practice in his sangha in that community.
Mhm.
His name is Thich Nhat Hanh,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of similarities actually between that tradition and Gestalt.
Uh-huh.
It's very much about being aware and cultivating an awareness in relationship. And one of the things he always says, which I love, is like, when you do breathing meditation, he says, enjoy the in breath, enjoy the out breath. And he's
Mhm.
like, enjoy sitting. And it's so much about enjoying. And I love that. I think there's something about like just being able to enjoy like all the things that are here, like I love that. So I'm very focused on enjoying as well at the moment. And I think there's something quite radical and potentially transgressive about cultivating pleasure and what we enjoy and being present, because it's not then allowing ourselves to be drawn into all these external like standards of performance and what's successful. And me as well, I'm in academia, right? So there's this whole like status and hierarchy and what you're supposed to do and what gives you points, and like it's really high status to get all these papers published, blah blah blah. But then I'm like, and I've been invited to do this keynote, which I'm very like excited about doing soon at a conference. But then I'm like, no, I'm gonna enjoy preparing for it. Am I enjoying this now? If I'm only like already anxious about the future there, which is again, it's not just meditation, right? This is very much Fritz Perls as well. The anxiety is there when we're already, in the future. Then I could just like, why am I doing it then? It needs to be enjoyable.
Wow, this is resonating in me very much.
Yeah.
I'm a sociologist and I work as an academic as well. And
Yeah.
this running is really connected with, my thoughts. My thoughts are running.
Mm,
We are ending up an article now with my colleague, and we
yeah.
will be doing it after this interview, actually.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful what you're saying, and
Mm.
yeah, I'm
Yeah, I
very
think
grateful.
I really enjoy that, like the enjoyment. And it also, do you know Audrey Lorde?
No, no.
Audrey Lorde, she was a queer black feminist poet and essayist.
Uh-huh. Okay.
She's done some excellent work. And she has one essay, which you can also find on YouTube, where she reads it out. And
Mhm.
it's called Uses of the Erotic.
Mhm.
And she talks about how the erotic is different from, pornography. It's about enjoyment. It's about feelings and sensations and being present,
Mm.
and finding what is joyful for me. And she talks from the position of a woman as well. So it's been very much kind of repressed, like and she says when we use the erotic power in us, that's like such a strong radical power. Like
Mm.
I can enjoy like collaborating with this person, like working well together with this person. I can enjoy like writing poem. I can also enjoy like painting the fence, all these things that she's enjoying. And
Mm.
it's kind of it's it's a great challenge to more maybe patriarchal society where it's very hierarchical, you know, what gives you status, like this is what you're supposed to be doing. But then it's like, no, the power is here, like in the erotic. What am I enjoying? Like
Mm.
really going back to that. I love that.
Mhm. Okay, I will I will see this. Uh,
Yeah.
Thanks. Especially how difficult is to, I mean, because I am, you know, getting at this enjoyment, and then somehow, I don't know, surprisingly, I am again in this state of anxiety.
Yeah.
What the hell am
Yeah.
I doing here?
Mm.
How did I end up in here?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that completely. So yeah, just to be clear, I'm not just like enjoying things all the time either. It's a I think it's actually a practice, you know? I think that's what it is, like meditation practice. We have to practice because the habit is this anxiety and this being driven by all these external standards which dominate our culture and society, like these norms, right? So it's a real practice, and it is a transgressive practice to cultivate again and again and again. Let go of that and enjoy. Like, what am I enjoying? Am I enjoying this?
And how long have you been, involved in this Zen practice? Because it's a Japanese, Korean.
Yeah. So this Zen master is from Vietnam.
Okay, Vietnam. Okay.
Yeah. So I've kind of I think maybe I mentioned briefly that I was first introduced to like meditation through my grandmother actually when I was a
Yeah.
child. So I would do like a mantra meditation with her every morning when I was there.
Oh,
So I've
okay.
kind of like meditation has been a part of my life, you know, since I was a child in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's become more and more like Zen meditation, maybe the past, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm very interested also in the similarities and differences and potential for like cross fertilization between Gestalt and Zen
Okay.
and Buddhist psychology. That really interests me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm still wondering because there was a moment in my past, like a few years ago, that I practiced Kwanum Zen, and then I stopped and I never came back. And
Mm.
during those interviews, humans interviews, I've been coming across people really being committed to meditation. And so I still wonder when I will come back to it.
Mm. Mm.
Just to, yeah, let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
because yeah, I completely agree that it is a practice
Mm.
that is helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's and at the same time, I think it's so interesting when I, for example, sit down to meditate because we're so, I think, influenced by the dominant society's norms and ideas. So it's so easy for me when, as soon as I sit down to meditate, it's also about trying to achieve something, right? It's very quickly becomes about achieving, and also that I'm not good enough, like I'm not doing it well enough. And then when it's just like, enjoy sitting right now, you're sitting, just enjoy. It's so um different when I'm able to just do that a little bit even, you know, because it's so subtle and so sophisticated, these norms about like achieving and not being good enough and performing and getting to somewhere else. Like even the sitting is like, it's not good enough. You're supposed to sit in a better way, right? You're supposed to have less like anxious thoughts or whatever, but it's like, no, just be gentle, let it go. Like, can you enjoy it?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Vikram, tell me more about this queer identity, if you like, how
Yeah.
yeah, what it constitutes in you, how did all start.
Mm. Yeah. So how did it all start? That's a big question. Well, it's been a long journey for me, you know, since I was a child, definitely. And and I define myself quite often as gay, but then I also say queer more and more, and that's also a sort of
Yeah.
an identity which I think also influences me, like as a therapist, as a trainer, and also as a researcher,
Mm-hmm.
because the queerness for me kind of queerness is about questioning some of the norms or the taken for, you know, what's taken for granted, like when it comes to what a man is, what a woman is, that there are only these two genders, that is very fixed and essentialist, that attraction can only be between these two. So the queerness is about questioning some of the rigid kind of binaries, and it's about maybe taking a somewhat more playful approach to things, like to see, well, you know, what else is possible, like what else, like we have so many different forms of fantasies and erotic longings in us. It's very limited, like for it to fit in this tiny box, like, you know, like heteronormativity is such a small box that I think most people who define themselves as straight don't even fit inside that box all the time, and it's even I think oppressive for straight people. Like I've had remember during a workshop I had I spoke about this, and this young guy who defined himself as straight, you know, and very sort of like, I don't know, like stereotype of this like young straight kid, and he was like saying, oh, yeah, Vikram, that's so right, like, you know, when I'm with my friends and like one of my friends says like that he's fallen in love with this girl, and then like, you know, he goes away, and then my other friends are like, oh my god, that's so gay, uh, and it's gay just because he's expressing an emotion, you know,
Ah,
it's
wow.
that strict. Or the fact that, you know, he's sitting in a particular way, that's gay, you know. So it's like,
Mhm.
even for this straight young guy, then it's so oppressive.
Mhm.
So I think this for me, queerness and the queer project is really liberating for everybody, you know. It's like trying to loosen up some of this very binary and essentialist thinking, and to me it fits very well with Gestalt, you know, where it's trying to move beyond this dualistic or binary thinking to something more whole, and to something more maybe fluid, that movement is possible, you know, that okay, you know, I've defined myself as gay, but then, you know, I may later define myself as bisexual. That's fine as well. Or, you know, maybe I don't need to define myself, but things are in process.
Mhm.
Um, and how I am, like gender wise, are also in process, and relationship wise, it's in the process. So yes, this is why I also say queer, I guess. It's because it's also questioning then the whole idea even of gay, actually, in a way, you know, the queer project can be quite radical in that sense, that would, and it's something I appreciate.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think for some like strategic purposes, it's important to have that, you know, gay label, because like in the political discourse for rights, all of these things, we need to have some strategic essentialism, like,
Uh-huh.
you know, some activists will say. But then on a more ultimate level, I think the queer idea is closer to the ultimate truth,
Uh-huh.
that, you know, we don't have this one label. Things are more fluid, things are more complex.
Okay.
So it's like, I like both. Like, I think the need for a label and the need for stability is also there in us as human beings. And it's something I really appreciate, the need for something, yeah, more stable.
Mm.
But then there's also the more fluid and process thing. I
Mhm.
could speak for for a long time about this, Camilla, I think, because it's also linked to my idea of place, right? That I've been very cosmopolitan, but
Yes.
then now I also very much appreciate the very local, this sense of, I know this tree in
Yeah.
the graveyard,
Yeah.
I know this person in the shop, you know. I think it's so important to also recognize our need as human beings for something stable and an identity in a world which is so much in
Perfect.
process
Yeah.
and fluid all the time.
Yeah.
And this is something I think we as Gestalt therapists, we also need to do that, because we have such a process focus and everything's fluid and all this. But then I think the counterpole, to speak in polarities, is the need for also stability. And if it's not recognized, I think it can come out in, you know, very unhealthy ways, like we see in the, like, you know, some places politically, for example. So yes, I like the queer thing. I like the fluidity. I like the questioning. I like the complexity. But then I'm also gay, which is more of a stable identity. And I can like hanging out with other gay friends and be gay together. So it's both, you know?
Yeah. And moving again from one to another, be you know, somehow flexible as I understand. But I really like your well, underlying this need for stability. Yeah, because it's like I have this kind of idea fix recently I have had of intergenerational dynamics within Gestalt community, and one of those things connected with this phenomenon for me is that this younger generation, because I roughly speak of two generations, is this younger generation is really, I mean, we need this stability, we need this sense of belonging. It is not taken for granted as it was in this past generations, that they could really easily differentiate, you know, start their rebellions and so on. So we can continue with this, you know, deconstructing, but at the same time we need, you know, safe place, community-based thinking and so on. So I like what you're saying, because it somehow proves my thesis.
I agree. I'm completely, I think, proving your thesis then. And I think it has to do something with the time and the spirit of the time as well, right? We're living in a very, very different time compared to like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I think. I think now being rebellious is actually saying, I need stability. That can also be rebellious, you know, in a society where it's all the time you're supposed to be so, what do they call it now? It's not flexible, but it's like, you know, I can't remember the new trendy word, but agile. You're supposed to be so agile all the time, you know? It's like, hang on, I'm gonna be stable. You know, that's what I'm gonna be. That's the rebellious thing, you know, now.
Interesting. So tell me, Vikram, how did you come to Gestalt then? How did it all begin?
How did it begin? I think it was, so as I said, you know, ever since I was young, I've been very curious about the human mind and this kind of spiritual practice, etc. And also my social justice engagement and passion that I've been interested in how we relate to each other in a larger field. So like psychology, the academic discipline didn't appeal to me so much. It seemed too, in a way, I wanted it to be more like close to experience, I guess, in one sense. And I think Gestalt also really like had links to my meditative practice and my spiritual outlook. And the first time I came across it, I think, was through a very, very good friend of mine. Marit, I always thought, like, before I knew about Gestalt, I always thought, this person, she's so wise, I thought, you know, whenever we'd have a conversation about something or we'd do something together, it wasn't just what she said, but, you know, it was how it was done and how she was responding. And it was kind of, Gestalt in practice, you know? And I thought to myself, she's such a wise person. And at some point I thought, I understood, because, you know, she's a Gestalt therapist. And I thought, I think maybe it has something to do with her being a Gestalt therapist. And Oh, and before she finished her Gestalt therapy training, you know, she had this final exam. And I don't know what it's like where you are, but in Norway, it can be this very creative event. Like
Oh.
so she during her exam where she presented the case that she had done, she sang a little bit. She did kind of a role play where she was acting like herself as the teacher and a client, and she spoke about how there had been attraction between her and this client, you know, and she did it in front of all these people, like breaking some taboos, and her husband was there and her mother, and then she walked around and she would like engage with us and have us like participate somehow in the dialogue and the process. I was just blown away. I was like, wow, what is this, you know? And also this way of living, this way of being. I was really attracted to it.
Mm.
Yes, I think Marit, my friend Marit, she played a very, very big role
Huh?
in yeah, drawing me to Gestalt.
Mhm, mhm. And how did that continue? You started your Gestalt training huh?
Yeah, so I'm well, I've studied a lot of different things, but one thing is I'm a lawyer, human rights
Ah,
specialized lawyer. So
okay.
I was at one point I'd started a doctorate in law.
Mhm.
And I found myself sitting in this office with all these legal texts, and I was miserable. And actually, those 3 months I had the scholarship there, I spent most of the time in the graveyard, which was close to the faculty as well. And really, you know, meditating on death and what is the meaning with my life. If I can let go, I did also these sort of like dying meditations where I was letting, like, on my back, trying to let go of everything. And, you know, all the conditioning and all the ideas and norms, because I was really unsure what was mine and what was somebody else's. Why was I doing this? And then eventually I came to the realization that, okay, you know, no is also a choice, because everybody was saying, well, you know, oh, you're so lucky to have this job, you know, and like people dream to have this job. And I was like, yeah, some people maybe, but it's their dream then. And then also people would say, well, what are you going to do if you quit? And I didn't have the answer. And then at some point, especially through meditation, I just found out that no, it's very clear to me that I should quit. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And I when I came to my supervisor and I quit, I immediately that day, Camilla, I felt so free. It felt like I'd kind of taken life back, you know. I was fully alive. And it was, I think, the first time in my life that I didn't have a plan.
Mm.
That I didn't have a plan. And but I had been thinking about Gestalt therapy, and I'd been thinking that I would maybe study Gestalt therapy next to doing the doctorate. But then when I quit the doctorate, I was like, okay, I'm going to study Gestalt therapy, definitely. So that was one of the things that became very clear, along with just sitting and again, you know, enjoying, back to that, like having mornings where I really enjoyed my cup of coffee. Like, I remember some of those first mornings after quitting the doctorate, I was just enjoying the cup of coffee. And that autumn, I quit during the spring,
Mhm.
2010, and the autumn of 2010, I started the Gestalt therapy training.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And what are your, I mean, well, different things are coming to my mind, but maybe what was the most challenging for you during the training, Gestalt training? Because I can,
Mm,
of course, ask you about what attracted you,
mm,
and you can speak about that too. I would appreciate, but also what was the most challenging?
mm, What was the most challenging thing during the training? Yeah, I because again, it's like maybe what attracted me and what was challenging is sometimes kind of they're close to each other, right? Because of course it was challenging, this way of sitting in a circle. Like I was used to law, you know, a big lecture hall, and you know, you just engage with the mind and you're all intellectual, and the professor doesn't know you, don't know the professor. This kind of, yeah, one way bank accounts
Mm.
pedagogy, right? but then suddenly sitting in a circle and kind of very exposed, and with all of myself, my feelings, my emotions, everything, all of me, that was both challenging and very attractive.
Mhm.
Yeah, that felt very alive. Um, but the more challenging things, let me have a think. Not sure, like nothing comes to mind just immediately as a very challenging thing during my training. Like
Maybe.
we had, of
Uh-huh.
course, we had, sorry, we had conflicts, you know, in the class, in the group, over 4 years. Of course we did, but they were also like, I think, beautifully kind of resolved or addressed or lived with somehow. Um, yeah. So I'm not sure if I can say right now what was the most challenging thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm,
but uh, but I could understand the first thing very well
mm,
also. And
mm. I think what, yeah, sorry, Camilla. One thing that I was interesting was, you know, I had this idea when I started that, oh, I want to be a therapist, I can be a therapist. And then of course in the training here, I'm sure where you are as well, there's the criteria that you have to go in, you have to attend therapy as a client,
Mhm.
you know, for certain amounts of sessions to become a therapist. And I thought in the beginning, I thought, well, I don't need therapy. And it's so interesting, like, you know, I think it's a kind of naive thing with a lot of people, or me included, then when I say that, think that, oh, I've had a good childhood. I had a good childhood. I had a happy childhood. We were a good family. If it's just that, then well, I think almost for certain there's something more there, right? So part of the challenging thing for me was also to see that, oh, yeah, you know, I'd idealized my dad for a long time. I'd really idolized him. And my mother, I'd sometimes demonized. I'd seen qualities in her which I disliked. And then when they popped up in me, I would really dislike them and hate them, you know? And then with my dad, I'd kind of idolized him and his calmness and all of this. He was so balanced, and he has these qualities and they are beautiful. But then there's another side to it. And he had a drinking problem when I was growing up, you
Mhm.
know, so he was calm, all this, but then he had a drinking problem, which was, um how can I say this, I mean, it wasn't the most traumatic of experiences for me, but it certainly affected me in some ways. This very subtle These subtle signals that you, as a child, you pick up on, right? That, oh, somebody's not, the parent isn't completely there, and you can't really trust the person completely. That's a very, I think it is traumatic, actually. I shouldn't say it's not traumatic. It is traumatic.
Mhm.
Um, and I think when I first said that it isn't traumatic, it's kind of downplaying it, because in our society, in our culture, there's such a strong idea that a person is either good or bad. Like if I say that my father had a drinking problem, then it's like, oh, it's horrible. He's a horrible man, you know? And he wasn't.
Mm.
My father is such a great person. He's the most beautiful, loving, humble, patient father, you know? And he had a drinking problem. And I think trying to start to become aware of the complexity
Mhm.
of my upbringing, my parents, and then also myself,
Mhm.
and having space for that. That was challenging,
Mhm.
but that was also tremendously enriching, right? I'm so grateful for that.
Mhm.
And I did, as part of my therapy, I did, at some point I did confront my father with his, the fact that he did have a drinking problem when I was growing up, and he had the chance to apologize.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he was, I think, terribly upset, because for him to, he's an older generation as well, and for him to be confronted in a way with something that wasn't good about how he had been as a father, that could kind of tear him down completely.
Mhm.
But then I was really trying to communicate that, no, you know, I appreciate you so much and the love you gave and the patience, and he's a real role model for me.
Mm.
And he's a real role model because he's also imperfect,
Mhm.
and then when I confront him, he can actually apologize, and that's being a whole human being, right? So I think therapy also helped with that. It was challenging, but to revisit my childhood and my parents and myself, but it was also very, very liberating, I think.
Mhm.
And it's interesting now when I'm talking about this and I'm doing it, this is going to be a public thing. Again, I start thinking, is it okay, right? But that's the idea from society, which is the dominating thing, that, oh, we should keep the facade. We should keep the facade. Don't say anything. Either it's all picture perfect or it was all horrible. But no, guess what? Most of the time, I think for most people, it's a mix. But we should talk about it. We should talk about what's good and we should talk about what was challenging. I think we all should.
Mm. And it strikes me how enriching this kind of holding those complexities has been for you. I guess I've been still struggling with those, complexities of and trying to reconcile mother and father in me, mother and father outside of me,
Mm,
as parents. But it's really, yeah, kind of, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm there. I am there at last. But yeah,
mm,
it's been very challenging
mm,
for me as
mm,
well. Uh, but I need to think of it as, yeah, it is liberating. I can understand it, but I don't know if I can, or is I can feel it.
mm,
Yeah, yeah, this is yet to come, I guess.
mm,
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 just to, yeah.
mm,
So, mm. And tell me about your Gestalt therapy these days. I mean, at your present, what did you, I mean, bring into your therapy room, into your workshops? What's the most crucial for you as a therapist, as a Gestalt
mm.
therapist? What are those values? What are those practices that you've introduced? Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, so I guess in all my roles, like both as a therapist and as a trainer and as a researcher, because I'm a professor at the
Yeah.
Gestalt Institute, right? So I both train and I also do a lot of research.
Mhm.
And in all of those roles, I think I'm quite influenced by my human rights background. So I'm very grateful for that as well, right?
Mhm.
And I'm very happy that Gestalt has this wider field perspective. I really appreciate that. So I'll very often, that's something that I bring in. So like I've done research, quite a bit of research within the gender, sexuality, relationship, diversity field.
Mhm.
And one of the studies I did was based on a group that I facilitated for transgender folks.
Mhm.
And in this group, one of the people attending said that they had so much social anxiety that most of the time they wouldn't even leave their home.
Mhm.
So coming to this group was really such a big thing, because then they'd at least leave their home and just walk a little bit out in public in the streets. And then, I mean, some parts of psychotherapy will kind of individualize the problem and say, oh, this person has social anxiety. And no, the problem here is clearly that society, is very sick. Society has a big, big gender identity problem. That's who has the problem. And that's something that I bring into both, I guess, my practice with clients,
Mhm.
to kind of really bring in that wider field perspective that, oh, I completely get that you have social anxiety, like, but also bring it into like the training with students and also into my research. Like, I'll very often, yeah, like most of my research will have that, will be informed, I think, by that perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and like at the training institute, I learned a lot as well from facilitating the groups that I had with transgender folks and the study that I did. So over time, I realized that this is a group of the population that's very often made invisible.
Mm.
And it's clear just even from the space and the structures that we have, like the toilets, for example. So at some point I put up these gender like neutral or toilets for everybody kind of signs on top of the more traditional toilet signs that we had at the institute. um, and um, and I think I, as a queer person and gay person myself, I feel I have a certain responsibility to be open about that and bring that into the conversation, or yeah, with my students. So like during the first class that I had that trained with me, where I was the main trainer, one person came out as transgender, and and then two other people came out as bi, I think. So it becomes this thing where I think it's of course, now I'm back to gender, sexuality, relationship diversity. That is definitely a big field of interest for me in research and training and everything. But even more than that, or beyond that, I'm interested in the wider field. So I'm also looked at and I have an attraction and enjoyment when it comes to nature, like the forest and the plants. So I've done one study with some of my students to look at therapy training and ecology, and
Mhm.
how maybe it can help address the therapy training, it can help address the ecological crisis.
Mhm.
So the institute moved, was it 2 years back or a year? Yeah, a little while ago now. The institute moved from kind of Oslo, more downtown Oslo, to a place a little bit outside of Oslo, where there are some trees.
Oh,
So I
lovely.
invited the students to, the first thing was, yeah, I exhaled just thinking about the trees. Isn't that interesting? It already has that effect. Just thinking about the trees, I exhale.
Mhm.
And and we did some experiments. Like I invited them to maybe do, because when they do client therapist role plays and things, uh, I said, well, you can choose to do it in one of the rooms here, or you can go outside into the woods there and do it. And then we talked about the difference, like what was it like to do therapy out there. And I also took the whole class out, and we did kind of an awareness exercise out, in the woods there, and how that felt. And before I invited all of them to walk with me out, I had this like idea come into my mind that was like, or this thought came into my mind, and it's the culture's thought, a society's thought, right? And it's, oh my God, Vikram, you're such a hippie. This is not a serious thing to do at a training institute and at university college. And you're associate professor. What are you doing? Like, and then I was like, and I saw it. Awareness is such a great thing, isn't it? And I saw it, and I was like, yeah, I see you. Culture, society, thoughts, because I'm permeable, right? Like I'm part of this field, so it'll come in. And then I'm like, I'm gonna let you go and be courageous, because whenever we do something, break a norm or do something, there some courage is required, I think. And then we did it, right? And I'd gotten some support from some of my colleagues that I met during a break. So it's never just like, oh, I had the courage. So that's another thing that I'm really like passionate about, the ecology.
Mhm.
Um, and then a third thing, I guess, is yeah, back to meditation and spiritual practices. So
Mhm.
really like looking at how Gestalt can be enriched also by Buddhist psychology and meditation. um, so my latest book isn't very sort of Gestalt kind of book, but it's definitely, I think, it's definitely yeah, maybe it is also a Gestalt book, but it's a meditation book, and it's kind of a Buddhist meditation book.
Uh-huh.
But I think a lot of the things that are in that book can also be helpful for, Gestalt students and Gestalt therapists. And I know a lot of, Gestalt students and therapists here have said that they really appreciated the guided meditations, etc. Because, we do awareness exercises at the Institute, but we can always draw on more, I think. So yeah, and now I think in the time ahead, I really want to go even more into this, like the intersection of meditation and Buddhist psychology and Gestalt. So I'm really interested in that.
And this book you are mentioning, is it in Norwich or this is in English?
Yeah, this is in English. Yeah, yeah. It's called Becoming Buddha.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's also available actually as a free podcast. So you can also listen to it like different places, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Last question is about community, Gestalt community. Do you feel part of Gestalt community? Do you feel that it is much work to be done around this, that we could actually gather, support one another? Is it needed?
Yeah, first of all, I think I would say that I really appreciate your project and the work that you're doing, because I think that is a big contribution to it. And especially now during the pandemic, when we can't actually physically go and see people anyway, I am just to hear Sam Manikam, the Indian professor, talk. I didn't know that he was part of the Gestalt community. I was like, that was really exciting for me as a dual heritage Indian and Norwegian, etc. So because I've been thinking, oh, is there a Gestalt community in India? I've been wondering. So thank you so much for the work that you are doing to really celebrate the community that we are globally. In Norway, I feel that the Gestalt community, I'm quite happy when I think about the Gestalt community in Norway. I am. It's there are, I don't know if there are that many events and things going on, but I do feel that there is it's a nice and warm and good community. Yeah. And then also maybe because I'm at the Norwegian Gestalt Institute, I have colleagues and I meet students all the time, and also because I supervise, I get to meet Gestalt therapists that have finished their training. So I feel like I meet with Gestalt therapists in Norway quite a lot. And then now I also do supervise some, Gestalt therapists doing their masters or other research elsewhere. So that's also really exciting that I'm getting to meet people in that way and participate in the research. And then, I mean, I'm looking forward to, I'm hoping to get to know Gestalt therapists more internationally as well. I was at the conference, the Taormina conference. When was that? It's a few years back in Sicily.
And more, I guess.
Yeah. That was a lot. I had a lot of fun there. That was great, I think. Getting to know people and workshops, and I really enjoyed that. So I guess the conferences, it's good to have some big international conferences to meet people as well, I think. Yeah, and I don't know, like I know that there's some talk and some people, say and probably have written about how there are certain differences within the community and how that works. But I mean, I haven't personally experienced anything in a bad way, at least. I think it's quite good as well if it's quite diverse. But it does fascinate me, though, that I think, like my good friend Marit, I feel she really practices Gestalt. Like she puts it into practice in her life in many, many ways. And not that Gestalt needs to become this lifestyle for everybody, but I do find it a bit strange that some people will be Gestalt therapists in the therapy room, And then when they're among colleagues or, you know, in other settings, it's like they never trained to have awareness or to have dialogue or to be curious. And that fascinates me. Then I'm like, maybe we should like just introduce like a mindfulness spell or something every now and then in different places. Just like, just stop up, breathe, like remember awareness, like, because that's a bit strange to me that if it does become just a, oh, it's just a profession. Yeah, sure, but like, I mean, who we are together as colleagues and all of this, I think can also be, we can be enriched if we also practice Gestalt therapy or Gestalt ideas in the wider community as a community. And I'm not saying that, you know, we're not, but maybe we could do that more, all of us as well. I'm aware now, for example, I'm talking a lot, right? And I'm also curious about you. I think it's the structure of this conversation, but I am also, I know that I can get very excited. And then I know that I can kind of become a bit like I take over the space, you know? And when I become aware of that, I can be like, okay, I am interested in you, Camilla, as well. You know?
Well, I'm aware that this structure, you know, makes people wonder. I mean, like makes interviewees wonder. But yeah, this is how it is. And as you can see, I am really involved, and I am really sharing. Of course, I stopped myself once or twice because there are so many similarities between you and me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so to be continued, I hope. But actually now I've been really listening to you and thinking myself that there is this community, but there is something there to be explored more, to be practiced more. Yeah, and it is interesting for me as well. That there is some kind of I don't know, deficiency, I don't know, kind of it's interesting, provoking anyways.
Yeah, and there's one thing that if I can just mention briefly as well, because I am involved in research, right? And what really, there's something that irritates me a bit, and it's like I think some Gestalt therapists, they get engaged in, or it becomes this idea that, oh my God, we need to do research. We need to do research to prove that Gestalt therapy is efficient, you know, and it's because of the politicians, they will come and get us if we prove. And this is actually the situation right now in Norway. The politicians are adding tax to our services and saying that we can't document. So it is a real fear that needs to be honored. But I'm also really, again, back to enjoying. What am I enjoying? What am I passionate? What am I longing for? That's why I'm studying the links to ecology, you know,
yes, exactly.
or the gender, sexuality, relationship, diversity things. These are things that matter to me, and also it's about what I enjoy doing. I enjoy learning more about this, and then maybe I can share something. And maybe we can improve the craft and the art of Gestalt therapy. And there are so many other like benefits to research, not just this fear-driven thing, which can easily dominate, I think. And that is something, I don't know if it's in the wider Gestalt community, but I definitely can feel that sometimes here in Norway, that whenever research comes up, it's about, oh, it's this fear thing, and we need to do it to prove something to the politicians and wider society. And that's like, no, let's come back to Gestalt therapy and breathe for a moment. Do we really want to do research on that basis? You know, let's definitely do research that's also, you know, shows effects like core, etc. It's very important. And for somebody, if somebody's even interested in doing that, great. But you know, but let's not just be completely fear-driven about research.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know, does that make sense to you? Or
very much, and very much when I'm thinking of Poland and of a wider community, and it's very coherent with what you've been saying from the very beginning. Okay, so thank you very much, Vikram, for this interview.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I feel, as I said, to be continued, because I will surely, yeah, I would email you, because I have some questions or some other thoughts in mind. So,
Yeah,
uh,
please do. And
uh,
maybe could I also say that if somebody's watching this and, you know, if they are interested in research in any of the areas that I'm interested in, I do also, you know, I as a professor at the institute, I'm expected to offer supervision and assessments and things like that at a master's and doctoral level as well. So I don't have, you know, limitless capacity, but especially if it's within one of the fields that I'm interested in, people are free to contact me.
great.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for now. I will send you a consent form, okay? Because we have this kind of agreement form, and
Yeah.
a review of the video.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so
Yeah.
bye bye.
Thank you.
Have a good
Okay.
day.
Bye bye. Bye.